Welcome to day 218 of our scripture reading and daily encouragement. Today we're going to cover Proverbs 17 and 18. Then we're going to cover 2 Corinthians chapter 2. Today in Proverbs, these two chapters are packed with great wisdom. It's so many small pieces that it's really difficult to cover it all. So I'm just going to focus on a few of them that stand out today instead of the many. In verse 3 of chapter 17, Solomon says, "Fire tests the purity of silver and gold, but the Lord tests the heart." If you just take gold, gold has to go through fire to burn out its impurities, to find out its value, what carat it is, how pure it is, how valuable. It has to go through the fire. And it's the same with us. Now, we're not going through a literal fire. It says the Lord is testing our heart, but he's putting us through the, quote, fire. We're allowed to go through the fire, tough times. And out of that test, out of that fire, our impurities are burned away, and it reveals our true character, our true heart, our true purity, our true value. Guys, it takes the fire to know the value of gold. Gold is no good without the fire, or it's less valuable, I should say, without the fire. And it takes the fire to know the value of our character and who we really are. The fire tests our hearts. So we should be thankful that God tests us, puts us through this fire so our impurities are burned off. I'm trying to give you a different perspective of how we should look at the trials and tribulations and persecution that we go through. Sometimes we don't understand it, but if the Lord is testing our heart, he's burning away the impurities, and it's a beautiful thing that we should gladly welcome. Now, the next one I'm going to focus on, this is for you grandparents out there. Verse 6, it says, "Grandchildren are the crowning glory of the aged. Parents are the pride of their children." You've probably heard someone say or said this yourself, "If I'd have known grandchildren were this good, I would have just skipped children." And obviously it's a joke, but now you know why grandchildren are so special. They're the crowning glory of the aged. The Hebrew word here for crown that's used when it says the crowning glory is the same word that they would use to describe the crown of a king, the crown a king would wear on their head. That crown meant something. It showed who a person was. It showed authority. And that's what he's saying here. Your grandchildren mean something to who you are. Be proud of your grandchildren. In verse 9, he says, "Love prospers when a fault is forgiven, but dwelling on it separates close friends." I'm going to say that one again. Love prospers when a fault is forgiven. See, there's going to be faults in our lives, but love prospers when it's forgiven. But if you dwell on that fault, it separates close friends. Guys, we've all seen this in our lives. Later, Peter and Paul are going to tell us, they're both going to tell us, one in 1 Peter 4:8 and one in Ephesians 4:2, that our love will cover a multitude of sins. That's 1 Peter 4:8. Ephesians 4:2 will say, our love should make allowance for each one's faults. As humans, we're going to have faults. Others that we call friends will have faults. The faults will be against us. We'll have faults against others. But how will we handle that? Solomon says if you forgive them, your love will prosper. It's wisdom to forgive that fault, not to dwell on that fault. Now here's a good one I want to cover. Simple and straight to the point. It says anyone who loves to quarrel loves sin. So if you have someone in your life that just likes to quarrel and argue and stir up trouble, Solomon says it actually means they love sin. They may say they love God, but their actions may speak louder than their words. If they are a quarreling person, it says they love sin. So get away from them. Get away from that person. If they don't receive correction and they just want to quarrel, they love sin. Get away from them. In Proverbs 18, verse 10, he says, "The name of the Lord is a strong fortress. The godly run to him and are safe." So the question for all of us is, who do we run to when we sense danger? When times are troubling, when things get tough or out of control, do you run to a friend? Do you run to a family member? Or do you run to God first? See, yesterday I had a problem. the first thing I did was I ran to God and I talked to him and I asked him for his favor and I asked him to come through on this situation just like he's come through on many other situations. But then I talked to Wendy. See, there's nothing wrong with me talking to Wendy. She's a trusted person for me. She gives good advice. But I went to God first. He's my strong fortress. He's my strong tower. He's where I go to for safety. This situation could be blown up against me. I'm doing the right thing, but it could be blown up against me. So I went to God first. Within a few hours, the situation was resolved and God answered the prayer. He answered it so quickly yesterday. I'm so thankful for that, Lord. So I thanked God first. Then I updated and thanked Wendy. See, Wendy's opinions and discernment are very valuable. They're very important to me. They're very helpful. Often she hears things from God that I don't. But God is my strong tower, my strong fortress. I'm going to go to him first for my safety. Now, if I go to her second and he uses and gives her information to help me, he can answer my prayer any way he wants to. But I'm trying to make the point that most times we go to a human for our problems first when we're in danger, when we're in trouble, no matter how big or how small. But this is telling us, go to God first. He's your strong tower. He's your fortress. I got two more I'm going to cover this morning. Chapter 18, verse 21 says, the tongue can bring life or death. This could be an entire daily encouragement just around this one statement. And many of you who spend any time in church have heard this at least said by someone. The tongue can bring life or death. He is saying what you say matters. Are you speaking death or are you speaking life? If you're walking around saying, here I am again, I just can't seem to do anything right, you're speaking death. Well, I've got this trouble going on, but God's going to help me out of it. You're speaking life. I'm just being very generic and easy on this one. But he says you will reap the consequences of what you speak. In other words, if you speak death, death and bad things are going to be reaped. If you speak life, life and good things will be reaped. So pay attention to what's coming out of your mouth. Is your tongue speaking death or is your tongue speaking life? If you say I can't do something, you never will do something. If you say I can do something, you are more likely to be able to do it. It's a simple example of speaking death or life. It's your choice, but your choice matters, because you reap the consequences of what you speak. Now, the last one I want to cover today from Proverbs, this to me is an incredible proverb. Chapter 18, verse 22. I use this verse now in every wedding that I do, that I perform. It says, the man who finds a The man who finds a wife finds a treasure, and he receives favor from the Lord. The man who finds a wife finds a treasure, and that man receives favor from the Lord. If you're a man that is married, listen to this. Pay attention. If you are a woman listening to this, go grab your husband or tell your husband to read Proverbs 18:22. The man who finds a wife finds a treasure. For us men, do we treat our wives like a treasure? A treasure is valuable. If we had a treasure of gold, we would protect that. We would defend it. We would most likely die to save someone from taking it or hurting our treasure. And that's the same way we should treat our wives. It says the man who finds a wife finds a treasure. Protect her. She's a treasure. She's valuable. Defend her. Be willing to lay down your life for her. When God gave her to you, you received favor from God. This verse alone can help get a marriage back on the right track if I can just change my focus, because sometimes Satan wants me to think that I'm against my wife. Or someone might say, I'm not even sure if God is okay with our marriage or whatever. You look at this verse and get your answer. My wife is a treasure. I'm supposed to treasure her, protect her. And I received favor from the Lord when I received her. That has to be Satan coming against our marriage. That verse can help turn things around for you. So I hope that's an encouragement for you today. Now we're going to jump over to 2 Corinthians chapter 2. And as Paul starts out here, he explains to them that he wrote the first letter, 1 Corinthians, with a troubled heart and many tears. That's important. It's an important little nugget for us to understand. If you think back to 1 Corinthians, he spent a good bit of time sort of getting on to them. He was chastising them a lot. Remember when he talked about it's our responsibility to judge the church? You've let a little bit of yeast ruin the whole batch. I can't believe I'm hearing these reports about you. He was getting on to them for the way they were living and acting. Sort of like, guys, you should know better. I taught you better than this. Why are you? I can't believe you're doing this stuff. But now we see that he actually grieved over having to write to them that way. It wasn't that he got all excited and high and mighty about going and getting on to them, and he enjoyed that. It says he had a troubled heart and many tears. So we see the heart of Paul behind writing 1 Corinthians. He's not someone who just wanted to get on to them. He was writing to them with a troubled heart, many tears, trying to get them to turn things around. Now, as apparent as we read 2 Corinthians 2, it's apparent that there was one man that caused a lot of problems. And he says, the man who caused all the trouble hurt all of you more than he hurt me. So that man didn't really hurt me, he hurt you guys. He's the reason I had to chastise you and get on to you. He says, but now we have to forgive him and comfort him. This insinuates the man was sorry, that he was repentant. Why do I say that? I say that because we're supposed to forgive everyone, good or bad. But the instruction to comfort him, it says forgive him and comfort him. You forgive all, but you don't comfort those who are doing evil. You get away from them. Paul's already told us, get away, get them out. His other instructions have already said, stay away from that person if they're not repentant. So the fact that this man was, that Paul said, forgive him and comfort him. Forgive him because you forgive everyone who's hurt you. Comfort him because he's repentant, because he was willing to change. But Paul then gives us really just a great little jewel, something that should help all of us. In verse 10, he says, when you forgive this man, I forgive him too. And when I forgive whatever needs to be forgiven, I do so with Christ's authority for your benefit, so that Satan will not outsmart us. Did you hear that? Forgive this man, I forgive him too. And when I forgive him, I'm doing it for your benefit. I'm forgiving him for your benefit, so that Satan will not outsmart us. He says, for we are familiar with his evil schemes. His evil schemes being Satan's evil schemes. Paul is saying that part of Satan's scheme is to use one of us, a fellow believer, to cause trouble. That's what had happened here. And we see that all the time in our churches. Then Satan wants us to live in unforgiveness, because that will continue to create disunity in the body of Jesus. See, Paul is really saying there's two opportunities here. There's two scenarios for us. Paul's already told us scenario one in 1 Corinthians. He says, if the person is not repentant, get the bad yeast out before it ruins the whole batch. We forgive the person, but we get away from them. But now we see another option. Forgive and comfort him if he or she is repentant. Either way, we forgive. Forgive means to let go. You're letting go because that pain is hurting you, not the person that hurt you. And we do it, we forgive and comfort, so that Satan can't gain a stronghold into the situation. These are simple instructions. Forgive and comfort those who are repentant. Forgive and get away from those who are not repentant. Easy formula, easy instructions. Very hard to live out. I get it, but very rewarding if you live that out. Paul then says, if we are Christ followers and we are spreading the gospel of Jesus, it's like a sweet perfume rising up to God. Think of just someone who smells really good, or a sweet, pleasant aroma coming off of a flower. He says it's a pleasing aroma for God. He says those who reject the message of Jesus, those that will perish, is actually a dreadful smell of death and doom to them. You won't smell good to a person who's evil, who doesn't want the message, who rejects the message. But to those who are being saved, it's a life-giving perfume. I love this thought. Now, as he ends, he says, he actually begins a warning that he's going to carry over into chapter 3. He says, we aren't like the many. That's a key word, the many who preach for personal profit. We are not like, Paul says, we are not like the many who preach for personal profit. That's a key phrase. He says the many. The many. So he's warning us in that time, and we should see it today, and we do see it today. Many people preach. They preach the good news, but they're doing it for their own profit, for their own gain, for their own power, for their own money, for whatever. Paul says, We preach the word of God with sincerity, not for our own profit, and with Christ's authority, knowing that God is watching us. So he's just laid out two types of preachers, so to speak. Those that preach for personal profit and those that preach with sincerity, knowing God is watching. But when he lays this out, he says only one of them has Christ's authority. That's a key point here. And that one is the one preaching with sincerity. He doesn't say the one preaching for personal profit has Christ's authority. He says the one preaching with sincerity is the one who has Christ's authority. This is a very, very, very key point. So I'm asking you today to choose wisely who you listen to. Know if that person is doing it in sincerity or for personal profit. I hope you know I'm doing it with sincerity. There's nothing for me to gain out of this. And that's the type of people you should follow. I'm not saying follow me only. I'm saying follow strong leaders who are doing it for sincerity, not for personal profit. It should be easy to see the difference if we just open our eyes. If it's not completely clear to you which model you should follow when you teach or when you preach, I want to make sure you get it. Do it with sincerity, knowing that God is watching. See, everything I'm doing for you, for me, I'm doing it because I want to please God, because I want to honor God. It's sincerity of heart, not personal profit. I don't make anything off doing this. There's no personal profit. I'm not trying to justify my position. I'm trying to say you ought to be able to see clearly when you look at somebody, whether they are doing it with sincerity or whether they are doing it for personal profit. You can make money as a preacher and be doing it with sincerity. So I'm not saying making money as a preacher is a bad thing. Paul has just told us that people should get paid for what they do. I'm saying doing it only to gain power over people, doing it only to gain personal profit, doing it only to gain some haughty, lifted up position where people are lorded over by you. That is the wrong heart. So whether you're teaching and preaching or whether you're listening to someone, find out if they're doing it with sincerity and you do it with sincerity, knowing that God is watching. I hope you're encouraged today, and I hope you have a great day.